Have you ever imagined what Christmas would feel like if, one morning, you stepped outside and discovered your entire city had outlawed it? No carols, no candles, no feasts, no decorations, nothing. The idea sounds impossible today, but there was a time, not just in one place, but across multiple countries, when Christmas wasn't just discouraged. It was illegal. And the story behind those missing Christmases might surprise you more than you expect, because it wasn't canceled by enemies of joy or by people who hated traditions. Instead, it was banned by leaders who believed they were protecting society itself. Those reach deep into centuries of conflict, fear, politics, and a very different idea of what Christmas was supposed to be. Before we reach the moment where Christmas disappears, imagine this: a holiday that looks nothing like the warm, cozy celebration you know. No peaceful family meals. No gentle lights. Instead, picture a night filled with loud street parties, crowded taverns, masked dancers, and rowdy games that lasted until sunrise. It was noisy, chaotic, and to many authorities, terrifying. If someone from the 1600s could see your modern Christmas, they might not even recognize it. And if you could step into their world for a moment, you might understand why some governments felt they had no choice but to take extreme actions. To truly understand why Christmas became a target, you have to step back into a time when the holiday didn't belong to the quiet winter evenings at home. For centuries, Christmas had been the loudest, wildest celebration of the year. In medieval Europe, people would gather for days of feasting, drinking, dancing, and mischief. Whole villages erupted in celebrations more like carnivals than anything we'd call holy. Some traditions were harmless. Others became so disruptive that entire towns braced themselves for the season with the same tension people now feel before a massive storm. This was the world the Puritans stepped into, not as villains, but as people who genuinely believed the chaos was dangerous. The Puritans, a strict religious group in England, saw these celebrations and believed they distracted people from the true meaning of faith. To them, Christmas wasn't just too noisy. It wasn't even a legitimate holiday. They argued that nowhere in the Bible did it say Christians must celebrate the birth of Jesus on December 25th. And the more they discovered about the date's ancient, pre-Christian roots, the more suspicious they became. So imagine the Puritans' shock when every December, the streets filled with drunken songs, rowdy games, and behavior they believed threatened the very moral fabric of society. To them, stopping Christmas wasn't an attack on joy. It was an attempt to protect people from chaos. And as their power grew, so did their determination to reshape the country's traditions. By the mid-1600s, England was a nation in crisis. King Charles I had been executed. Parliament, now controlled by Puritans, saw this as their chance to transform society into something stricter, purer, and more disciplined. And one of their first targets was Christmas. It might sound unbelievable, but the campaign to abolish Christmas began with small steps, removing festive decorations from churches, banning Christmas services, and replacing the holiday with a quiet day of fasting. But what started as a religious reform quickly turned into something far more dramatic. On June 1647, Parliament officially declared Christmas illegal. Suddenly, a celebration people had known for centuries vanished overnight. You might imagine quiet acceptance, but the reality was much more dramatic. People who had grown up cherishing their Christmas feasts and gatherings didn't simply give them up. Instead, tension filled the streets as ordinary citizens secretly tried to celebrate while government officials patrolled towns searching for any sign of forbidden cheer. Picture someone quietly placing a sprig of holly in their window and praying no one noticed. Or families whispering carols so softly they barely made a sound. For some, breaking the law felt like defending a beloved tradition. For others, the fear of punishment was enough to erase Christmas entirely. And here's where the story gets even more interesting. As you follow these hidden celebrations, you realize something unexpected. The fight over Christmas wasn't really about one day of the year. It was about who had the right to shape society. Was it the government, the church, or ordinary families? Every small act of resistance, every candle lit, every secret feast, every quiet carol became a symbol of a much larger struggle. But while England fought its battles, a very different version of this story was unfolding across the ocean. When the Puritans sailed to North America, they carried their beliefs with them. And in the new colonies, far from the tensions of European politics, they had the freedom to build a society completely aligned with their values. For them, banning Christmas wasn't controversial, it was natural. By the 1620s and 1630s, the colonies of Massachusetts and New England were filled with settlers who viewed Christmas celebrations as sinful distractions. Instead of feasts, they dedicated December 25th to ordinary work, quiet reflection, or nothing at all. If you had lived in Puritan Boston, you would have heard no bells, seen no decorations, and found no special event on Christmas morning. If anything, authorities kept an even closer eye on potential celebrations than in England. The penalties were real: fines, public punishment, or forced labor for anyone caught honoring the forbidden day. Imagine walking into the bustling Boston marketplace on December 25th and seeing shops open, workers busy, and not a single hint of festivity in the air. To the Puritans, this wasn't sad. It was proof that their society had escaped the chaos of the old world. And for decades, Christmas remained just another day, forgotten by most and avoided by all. But not everyone in the colonies agreed. Many newcomers from Europe brought their Christmas traditions with them. German settlers wanted their trees. Dutch families wanted their St. Nicholas. English Anglicans wanted their church services. The colonies weren't a single culture. They were a patchwork of beliefs and customs slowly learning to live together. And whenever December approached, small sparks of Christmas appeared again, even where it was banned. Imagine a German family quietly lighting candles in their home, or a group of Anglicans whispering prayers in a private room, terrified someone might hear. These hidden celebrations echoed the resistance happening in England, and while the Puritans tried to control them, they couldn't stop the slow blending of cultures. Christmas began to return, not as a loud festival, but as something calmer and more intimate. Something closer to what you'd recognize today. Meanwhile, across the ocean, a major shift was happening. The strict Puritan government in England collapsed. The monarchy was restored. Suddenly, all the bans, all the restrictions, and all the attempts to reshape society vanished almost instantly. People who had lived through years of strict rule rushed to celebrate again. Christmas returned with an explosion of joy, relief, and emotion. The holiday, once pushed underground, rose back to the surface brighter than ever. But in the American colonies, the story didn't move so quickly. Even after England restored Christmas, many Puritan communities refused to bring it back. For them, the ban wasn't political, it was spiritual. And it wasn't lifted until well into the 1800s. Yes, you heard that right. Massachusetts did not officially make Christmas a public holiday until 1856. If that surprises you, you're not alone. It's almost strange to imagine a world where Christmas barely existed in the United States. But here's the twist you might not expect. When Christmas finally returned to America, it wasn't because the government changed its mind. It was because culture did. Writers, artists, and storytellers transformed Christmas into a peaceful, family-centered celebration. And no figure shaped this new Christmas more than the man who wrote a single poem that would forever change the world's idea of the holiday. But before we get to him, think about what all of this says. Christmas wasn't banned because people hated happiness. It was banned because the holiday itself changed over time. Once a chaotic festival, later a quiet family tradition, Christmas became a mirror of whatever society needed it to be. And sometimes, when a culture feared disorder, the holiday simply vanished. As you follow this story, you begin to see Christmas not as a fixed tradition, but as a living, evolving idea. Something shaped by conflict, beliefs, and the choices of millions of ordinary people. And just when it seems like the story is settling down, a surprising twist begins to form, one that will reshape Christmas forever. Before the modern Christmas you know could take shape, the world needed someone to reimagine it completely. And that moment arrived in the early 1800s when the holiday, still scattered, still uncertain, and still controversial in parts of America, found a new voice. It came from writers who believed Christmas could be something gentler, something warmer, something that brought families together instead of pulling communities apart. And one of those voices belonged to Washington Irving, a man whose stories quietly reshaped the emotional core of Christmas without most people even realizing it. Irving looked back at Old English traditions and imagined a Christmas filled with kindness, hospitality, and unity. His stories weren't wild festivals. They didn't resemble the chaotic celebrations Puritans had feared. Instead, they painted a picture of snowy evenings, generous hosts, peaceful gatherings, and families reconnecting after long months apart. At a time when industrial cities were growing cold and crowded, readers fell in love with his comforting vision. And slowly, almost invisibly, Christmas began shifting away from noisy public revelry and toward private warmth. But while Irving planted the first seeds, it was another writer who transformed Christmas forever. And you probably know him by name. Charles Dickens didn't just write about Christmas, he rebuilt it. When A Christmas Carol was published in 1843, it didn't simply become a bestseller. It became a cultural earthquake. Imagine the shock of reading a story where Christmas wasn't about drunken games or strict moral warnings, but about generosity, compassion, and the hope that even the hardest heart could change. Dickens showed people a holiday where kindness mattered more than ceremony, where giving mattered more than tradition, and where the meaning of Christmas lived in the choices you made, not in the decorations you displayed. And readers embraced it with a hunger that surprised even Dickens himself. After centuries of conflict, uncertainty, bans, and shifting beliefs, the world finally saw a version of Christmas that felt wholesome, healing, and deeply human. And almost overnight, this new Christmas swept across continents. Families began gathering for thoughtful dinners. Workers were given time off. Children became the emotional center of the holiday. Carols returned with peaceful melodies instead of rowdy shouting. Christmas trees, once unfamiliar in many places, became symbols of warmth and stability. And gift-giving, once a chaotic public ritual, became something personal, often done quietly at home with people you loved. This transformation didn't erase Christmas's complicated past, but it softened it, reshaped it, and allowed the holiday to grow into something universally cherished. Yet even with this new warm spreading, there was still a missing piece, a unifying symbol that could tie the entire holiday together. And that symbol would come not from Europe, but from America. In 1823, a poem anonymously published in a New York newspaper caught readers' attention. You probably know its opening line, "'Twas the night before Christmas." What you may not know is how dramatically this single poem reshaped the world's understanding of the holiday. It introduced the idea of a jolly, magical figure who traveled through the night delivering gifts. A sleigh pulled by reindeer. Names like Dasher, Dancer, Prancer, and Vixen. Even the quiet Christmas Eve as children waited for something wondrous to happen. With just a few verses, the poem created an image so charming, so full of imagination, that it swept through American households like wildfire. And when artists began illustrating this cheerful gift giver, he slowly evolved into the Santa Claus you recognize today. Not stern, not mysterious, not tied to any strict religious identity, just joyful, generous, and delightfully human. It's almost unbelievable when you think about it. And the shift happened so smoothly that most people soon forgot the centuries of conflict that came before. But maybe the most surprising part of the whole story is what happened next. As Christmas grew more popular, countries that had once ignored it began embracing it. Cities that had once outlawed it began decorating their streets. And even cultures without Christian roots adapted Christmas into unique celebrations of light, family, and generosity. What had once been a divisive holiday slowly became a global one, not because governments demanded it, but because people genuinely wanted it. And yet, hidden beneath all the today's sparkle and joy, the shadow of its banned past still reminds us that traditions aren't as permanent as they seem. They evolve. They disappear. They return in forms no one expects. And the Christmas banned by Puritans centuries ago is not the Christmas you celebrate today, or the Christmas your great-grandparents celebrated, or the Christmas future generations will experience. The holiday keeps reshaping itself around what people need most in uncertain times. Maybe that's the real secret behind Christmas, its ability to reinvent itself without losing its heart. Even at its lowest moments, when its songs were silenced, when its celebrations were punished, when entire towns swept it from their calendars, the idea of Christmas quietly survived. Not because of laws, not because of rulers, but because people carried it in their imagination. They remembered how it felt to gather, to share a meal, to light a candle in the darkest part of winter. And whenever the world allowed it again, Christmas rose back to the surface like a memory too powerful to stay hidden. So when you celebrate it now, when you hang a light, open a gift, or share a moment with someone you love, you're taking part in a tradition that survived bans, conflicts, centuries of change, and more than one attempt to erase it. You're continuing a story that has been rewritten again and again by ordinary people who refuse to let it fade. And maybe that's the true magic of this holiday. Not the stories of flying reindeer or enchanted sleighs, but the simple fact that Christmas has always returned, no matter how many times the world tried to silence it. As long as someone somewhere wanted a moment of warmth in winter, Christmas found a way. If you carry that thought for just a moment, You might feel something unexpected, a sense of connection to all the people who kept those quiet, hidden traditions alive in centuries when celebrating Christmas was a dangerous choice. You're part of the same long line of dreamers, families, and storytellers who believed the holiday mattered, even when the world said it didn't. And now, as this story reaches its final moments, you might find yourself wondering what other traditions once vanished and came back, or how many hidden chapters still lie in the winter shadows of history. Because Christmas has survived so much more than we ever imagined, and its story is far from finished. As you look back on this strange and winding history, you start to realize how astonishing it is that Christmas survived it all. A holiday that was once banned, punished, and pushed into silence somehow became one of the most widely celebrated days on Earth. The journey from outlawed festival to cherished family tradition wasn't simple or predictable. It was shaped by fear, hope, imagination, and the stubborn determination of ordinary people who refused to let their favorite moment of the year slip away. And maybe that's what gives Christmas its quiet power even now. No matter how much the world changes, the longing for warmth in winter, the desire for connection, and the hope for a little magic never really disappear. If anything, the centuries when Christmas was forbidden only made it more precious. They remind you that traditions aren't guaranteed. They're kept alive through choices, memories, and the small rituals that families pass from one generation to the next. When you light a candle, share a meal, or give a gift, you're continuing a story that survived under extraordinary pressure. You're adding your own chapter to a history that stretches across continents and centuries, shaped not by laws, but by people who quietly held onto something they loved. So as this story ends, let yourself wonder for a moment what Christmas will look like 100 years from now. Will it evolve again? Will new traditions appear and old ones fade? And which small detail from your own celebration might someday become part of its future? It grows with every generation, bending but never breaking, changing but never disappearing. If you enjoyed exploring this forgotten chapter of Christmas history, you might want to dive into the stories behind other winter traditions that almost vanished, or discover how different cultures around the world reinvented the season in their own way. And I'd love to hear from you. Did you know Christmas was ever banned? Which part of the story surprised you the most? Share your thoughts in the comments, and let me know what Christmas mystery you want to uncover next.